Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Suzanne. And thank you to the Illinois Native Plant Society for the opportunity to do this research on one of my favorite ecosystems, the oak, hickory, woodland vernal pools. And this research was conducted in Cook County, Illinois at Possum Hollow Woods. And this is a good picture that illustrates sort of why we wanted to research this. There's clearly something going on with vernal pool seed banks. So we wanted to assess. Let me make sure I can forward slides. Okay. We wanted to assess whether or not a seed bank exists, scientifically prove that, and if so, if there are spatial patterns that could help in restoration, and to understand the system better generally. And so in June 2019, we went out and we sampled these vernal pools in the Cook County Forest Preserves in some pretty degraded areas in order to try to really understand some of the toughest cases and not sample restored vernal pools in restored woodlands, because those would have probably had seeds added to them. So the sampling sort of looked like this. We had, I just want to give you an idea of this because the distance from center becomes important. And so we randomly sampled throughout both the inner portion of the pool and the outer portion of the pool. And then we grew those samples in both dry and wet conditions because vernal pools are both wet and dry ecosystems. And so just to jump into our results right away, because it's not too much more complicated than that, we found a total of 404 germinants, which was great because these vernal pools had very little growing in them, except for that one in the opening slide that was completely covered. And so the total native germinants far outweighed the non-native germinants, which is also seen as a encouraging result. And the native species richness to the non-native species richness, or the total number of non-native and native species, was also encouraging in that we found far more native species. Also, just to give you an idea of some of the types of plants that were in there, most were forbs and sedges, and that is pretty consistent with the flora of the vernal pools in the woods. So because this is the Native Plant Society, here are a few of the highlights. These plants were in some of the pools, they were in low abundance, and so it was clear that they were already there. And then in some of the pools, there was nothing growing or very little. And so these plants were actually not on the surface, but just hiding in the soil seed bank or waiting out the buckthorns. And so here, this graph shows the two factors, the location where we sampled and the depth at which the sample was taken. And so we found that in the center of the vernal pools, at the shallowest depth from 0 to 5 centimeters, we found the most germinants per sample. And if you see the y-axis here is kind of a low number, that's because we took a lot of samples. We took over 500 samples, and so ultimately it scales up. And then we found declining germinants as the samples were deeper and toward the edges of the pool. And so location is important. This is a restored vernal pool, just to give an idea of what a healthy ecosystem looks like, and that we have shown some evidence that there's a drawdown seed dispersal effect, drawing seeds to the center of the pool, which from our sampling we can see looks to be true. And so how do we understand the depth and the location of the soil seed bank in terms of restoration? Well, one proposition is that perhaps the soil in the first 5 centimeters could be either removed or churned up a little bit, and a soil seed bank could flush after that with plants and seeds that were dispersed a long time ago, perhaps even before the buckthorn and other invasive species were present on the landscape in such abundance. And so again here, I just wanted to show that with the seed density on the bottom graph here, there were a lot of seeds in these pools when you do the math. And so from 0 to 5 centimeters right underneath you, if you're in the center of the pool, there are almost 1,000 seeds under your feet per square meter. And then according to our data. And then also that another important takeaway from our research was that the saturated soil samples had a significantly higher germination rate for native species richness. And so with that, I think I'm at 5 minutes. And basically the main takeaways are that there's a seed bank, and after a disturbance is removed, such as buckthorn, perhaps a practitioner or an ecological restoration ecologist or volunteer could say, great, the vernal pool is probably in good shape. Let's let the seed bank take over and we'll come back and continue to manage invasive species. And that there are a few habitats that have such characteristics.